The boxes arrived on a Tuesday. Margaret saw them from the kitchen window before she heard the car. 3 flat-packed cardboard boxes in the back of David's SUV, the kind you got from the liquor store or the moving company, the kind that meant someone had already made a decision. She stood at the kitchen window with her coffee and watched her son and her daughter carry the boxes up the front walk. She didn't go to the door. She waited. Ellen knocked first. Ellen always knocked, even after 40 years, and then tried the handle because it was unlocked, because Margaret left it unlocked in the morning and locked it at night and had been doing this for 31 years in this house without incident. "Mom?" Ellen called from the entryway. "Kitchen," Margaret said. They came in. David first, with a specific forward momentum he'd had since he was a boy, always moving toward the next thing, always with a plan. Ellen behind him, carrying one of the flat boxes and her laptop bag, which meant she had documents. Margaret turned from the window. She looked at the boxes. She looked at her children. "You brought boxes," she said. David set his down on the kitchen table. "We wanted to get started," he said, "while we're all here." She held her coffee cup. She thought about asking, started on what? She already knew started on what. She'd known since the phone call last week, when Ellen had said, "We've been thinking," which was the specific phrasing Ellen used when she and David had already decided something and were preparing to present it. She said, "Sit down." They sat. She sat across from them with her coffee and she looked at them. Her son, who was 53 and had her husband's jaw and his own particular way of moving through a problem like a contractor moving through a building, assessing, planning, executing. Her daughter, who was 51 and had Margaret's eyes and her father's need to make everything organized before she could rest. She loved them completely. She was very angry. Not yet. The anger was just arriving. She was going to let it arrive fully before she did anything with it. Some decisions get made for you under the name of care. If you've ever been on either side of that, this is that kind of story. Subscribe before we keep going. Margaret Elise Calloway was 78 years old and had lived in the house on Sycamore Lane in Delwood, Ohio for 31 years. She'd built it. Not literally. She'd hired contractors, she'd made decisions, she'd signed the papers and chosen the lot and stood in the mud of what would become the backyard and tried to see what the thing would be when it was finished. She'd done this in 1993, 2 years after her husband Robert had died, because the house they'd been in together had become, after he was gone, a place that held too much of his absence and not enough of her presence. She'd needed a house that was hers, that held the shape of her decisions rather than the shape of a life that had reorganized itself around a loss. She'd been 53 when she built it. The same age David was now, which she noticed. She'd chosen the lot because of the oak tree in the back corner, which was already old when she bought the property and which was older still now. 31 years older, which was visible if you knew where to look. She'd chosen the kitchen window placement so the morning light would come from the east. She'd chosen the layout of the 2 back rooms so the study got the quiet and the guest room got the view. She'd made these choices with the specific care of a woman who understood she was making a permanent decision and wanted to make it right. She'd made it right. The house was not large. It had 3 bedrooms, which was one more than she needed, but one fewer than the children always seemed to think was appropriate for hosting. The kitchen had been updated once in 2008, when the counters had reached the end of their reasonable life, and she'd replaced them with the ones she'd wanted the first time but hadn't been able to afford. The garden was her work. 31 years of accumulated planting decisions, some of which had worked and some of which had not, and all of which were hers. She'd had a fall in February, a small one. The step from the back porch, her foot had caught the edge. She'd gone down on her left knee and her palms and sat there on the cold concrete for a few minutes, waiting to understand whether anything was seriously wrong. Nothing had been seriously wrong. She'd gotten up, gone inside, washed her hands, made herself tea, and then sat at the kitchen table and allowed herself to be frightened for about 20 minutes before putting it away. She had not called her children. She'd told Ellen 2 weeks later, in passing, because Ellen had asked directly if everything was okay, and Margaret had decided that lying about a fall was not the kind of thing she was going to do. Ellen had called David. David had called back. The phone call had been the preamble to the boxes. They sat at the kitchen table, her children, with their flat-packed boxes and Ellen's laptop, and the specific quality of people who have prepared for a conversation and are ready to begin. "Mom," David said. "Let me guess," Margaret said. He held her eye. You found a place, she said. Or you found a situation, closer to one of you. Easier. You have a presentation. Ellen opened her mouth. I'm not being difficult, Margaret said. I'm describing what I see. Boxes. Laptop. You both here on a Tuesday, which required David to take a day off and Ellen to move her morning. She looked at them. You planned this. We've been worried, Ellen said. The fall was in February, Margaret said. It's May. That doesn't mean. I know what it doesn't mean, Margaret said. I also know what it means that I've been fined for 3 months and you've arrived with boxes. David put his hands on the table. He had the expression she recognized from when he was a child, the one that came when he'd worked something out and was sure he was right about it and was going to be patient about explaining. We found the place in Westfield, he said. Near Ellen and Tom, 1 floor, walk-in shower, they have a community garden, the medical center is 3 blocks away. The waiting list is short right now. Did you put my name on the waiting list? Margaret said. A pause. We wanted to talk to you first, Ellen said. Ellen. We put it on a soft hold, Ellen said. Not a commitment, just, you put my name on a waiting list for a place I haven't seen, Margaret said. For a move I haven't agreed to. It's not a commitment, David said. It's not the point, Margaret said. The kitchen was quiet. The morning light was coming through the east window exactly as she'd planned 31 years ago. The coffee was cooling in her cup. Outside, the oak tree in the back corner was doing the thing it did in May. The specific quality of green that was different from June green. Younger, almost electric. She held her coffee. She thought about what to say. She thought about how many times in 78 years she'd managed a version of this. Being managed by people who meant well. She thought about the specific art of making the person who was trying to control something for your own good feel heard without giving them what they were after. She was good at this art. She was very tired of it. Tell me what you're actually afraid of, she said. David looked at her. Not the fall, she said. Not the 1-floor shower. What are you actually afraid of? Ellen looked at the table. That something will happen, she said, when none of us are here. Something, Margaret said. That you'll fall again and there's nobody. Ellen stopped. That we'll get a call. Margaret held the cup. That's a reasonable fear, she said. It's a real thing to be afraid of. She paused. It's your fear. It's not the same as my reality. Your reality is that you are 78 years old and you live alone, David said. My reality is that I'm 78 years old and I live in a house I built, she said. Those are different sentences. He held her eye. I know you love this house, he said. This isn't about love, she said. It's about something else. What? She held the cup. She thought about how to say it. She said, when Robert died, I was 51 years old, and everyone had a plan for me. Your aunt had a room I should stay in for a while. The grief counselor had a process. The neighbors had food and schedules and people to check on me. She looked at the table. And all of it came from love. I know that. I've always known that. She looked at her children, and not one person asked me what I needed. The kitchen was quiet. I built this house because I needed to make one decision that was mine, she said. After a year of everyone else's decisions made on my behalf out of love and worry. She looked at the window. I stood in the mud out there in November of 1992, and I looked at an oak tree and I thought, this is where I'm going to be. I chose it. I chose the lot, the tree, the window placement. I chose where the study went and why. She held the cup. 31 years ago, I chose this place as the place where I would have authority over my own life. Ellen was looking at her. And now you've brought boxes, Margaret said. Drop a comment before we keep going. Tell me if you've ever been in this kitchen, on either side of the table. Tell me what it looked like. Ellen's daughter arrived at noon. Cassie was 29, lived in Columbus, was a physical therapist, and had driven 2 hours because Ellen had called her the night before and said, Margaret would learn this later. Your grandmother is being stubborn, and I think she might listen to you. Margaret had always liked Cassie. She liked her in the specific way of grandparents who recognize something in a grandchild that doesn't come from either of the parents, some perpendicular quality. something that came from further back. Cassie paid attention in a particular way. She noticed things other people moved past. She came in through the back door, which she'd always used, the way she'd used it since she was old enough to come through the garden on her own. She kissed Margaret on the cheek. She looked at David and Ellen. She looked at the boxes still on the table. "I'll make more coffee," she said. She made it. She poured. She sat down between her mother and her uncle, and she held her cup, and she didn't launch into anything, which was the quality Margaret appreciated. She waited for the room to tell her what it needed. "Your grandmother isn't interested in the Westfield place," David said. "I'm interested in being consulted about it," Margaret said. "That's different." Cassie held her cup. "What did they show you?" she said to Margaret. "They haven't shown me anything," Margaret said. Cassie looked at David. "We have the materials," Ellen said. "On the laptop." "But you haven't visited?" Cassie said. "We wanted to establish whether it was a real option first," David said. "How do you establish that without Mom's input?" Cassie said, not accusing. Genuinely asking. "By doing the research," David said. "So she has the information." Cassie held her cup. "That's very efficient," she said. "Cassie," Ellen said. "I'm not criticizing," Cassie said. "I'm saying, you did the research. Now she has the information. That's different from the decision." "Nobody's forcing a decision," David said. "You brought boxes," Margaret said. This landed in the room with a specific weight. David looked at the boxes. The boxes were for... We thought we could start going through things. Organize what matters, what could be donated. Regardless of the specific situation, it's useful. Useful for whom? Margaret said. He held her eye. The boxes were for efficiency, she said. You came prepared, which means on some level, you'd already decided the decision. We decided that talking about it was overdue, David said. That's all. Margaret held her coffee. David, she said, you're a good son. You are. What you're trying to do comes from love and from real worry, and I know that. She paused. And you came with boxes. He was quiet. You came with boxes, she said again, because on some level, you'd prepared for this to be a logistics problem rather than a conversation. He held the table. That's not fair, he said. Tell me where I'm wrong, she said. He didn't. The kitchen was quiet. Cassie got up. She said she was going to look at the garden, which was a thing she'd done since she was small. When the conversation needed breathing room, she went to the garden. Margaret had always understood this about her. She went out the back door. Ellen opened her laptop. Not to present anything, just to have something to do with her hands, which was a habit she'd had since childhood. The fall scared me, Ellen said, quietly. Without the organizational tone, I know, Margaret said. It really scared me, Ellen said, when you told me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I know, Margaret said. I'm not saying your fear isn't real. Then what are you saying? Ellen said. Help me understand. What do you want from us? Margaret held her cup. I want to be asked, she said. Before the list, before the boxes. I want the conversation to start with a question rather than a plan. Ellen looked at the table. We thought you'd say no to the question, she said. Maybe, Margaret said. Maybe I'd say no, but it's my no to say. And if something happens while you're saying no, Ellen said, what then? Then something happens, Margaret said. And I will have been the one who chose the circumstances of the risk. She looked at her daughter. Ellen, I am 78 years old. I have been making decisions about risk my whole adult life. I chose to marry your father knowing his family had heart trouble. I chose to build a house alone at 53. I chose this garden, which I have fallen in twice and which I will probably fall in again. She held the cup. Risk is not a reason to remove choice. Risk is why choice matters. Ellen looked at her for a long time. I'm afraid of losing you, she said. I know, Margaret said. Not the way you think, Ellen said. Not just death. I'm afraid of one day getting a call and knowing I could have done something and I didn't because I was trying to respect your autonomy. That's not the framing, Margaret said. What is the framing? The framing is, are you making decisions for me because you love me or because you're afraid of feeling responsible? Margaret said. Both can be true, but they're different reasons. Ellen closed the laptop. The garden door opened and Cassie came back in. She had something in her hand, not from the garden. A notebook, small, the kind with a cloth cover. She set it on the table. Margaret looked at it. It was on the shelf in the study, Cassie said. The low one. It was facing out so the cover was visible. She sat down. I wasn't snooping. I've always seen it there. I just never... She paused. I picked it up. I read a little. She held Margaret's eye. I think they should read it. Margaret looked at the notebook. 31 years old. She'd written in it the year she built the house. She'd kept a record of the decisions. Not a diary, not feelings, something more practical. What she'd chosen and why. The reasoning that was going to disappear if she didn't write it down. She picked it up. She held it for a moment. She looked at her children. I'll read it to you, she said. She opened it. November 1992. The lot on Sycamore Lane. Oak tree at the back corner. I made an offer today. I stood in the mud for 20 minutes and thought about Robert and whether this was something he would have done or something I was doing because he was gone, and I couldn't separate those things. So I stopped trying. The tree is real. The light from the east in the morning will be real. Those are enough reasons. She looked up. David was looking at the table. Ellen's eyes had the quality they got when she was holding something. Margaret turned the page. January 1993. The contractors gave me 3 options for the window placement in the kitchen. I chose the east-facing one over the objections of the contractor, who thought the street-facing one was more typical. I don't want typical. I want the morning. March 1993. Foundation is in. I stood on it this morning in the cold. It was concrete and it was mine, and I have not felt that since before Robert got sick, which is almost 3 years now. I have not stood on something I could call mine in almost 3 years. She stopped. She held the notebook. The kitchen was quiet. I built this house, she said, because I needed to stand on something I'd chosen, because I'd been standing on things other people had made or managed for 3 years, and I needed to make something myself. She looked at the window. The east-facing window was an argument I had and won. A small argument, with a contractor who thought I was wrong. I won it, and every morning for 31 years, I've had the light I wanted. She held the notebook. You want to move me into 1 floor, she said. Walk-in shower, community garden, 3 blocks from a medical center. She looked at them. All of those things are reasonable. All of those things are real considerations for a woman my age. She paused. But none of them are mine. None of them come from my choosing. They come from what's convenient and what's safe and what makes you feel less afraid. David looked at her. Mom, I'm not finished, she said. He held still. I know I'm not the same as I was, she said. I know the step caught my foot in February and it didn't catch it in 1999. I know the difference between what I can do now and what I could do at 60. She looked at the notebook. I am not arguing against reality. I'm arguing for my right to participate in what we do about it. She set the notebook down. I will look at the Westfield place, she said. I will look at it with open eyes and I will tell you what I think. I will also tell you what I need here, in this house, for this house to be something I can stay in safely. A railing on the back step, the bathroom modified. Whatever a professional assessment says is necessary. She held her hands on the table. I will do all of that. I will be practical. I will be honest about what I can't do alone. She looked at David and then Ellen. And in exchange, I need you to ask me. Before the lists, before the boxes. Ask me. David held the table. He looked at the boxes. He looked at his mother. Okay, he said. Okay, what? She said. Okay, I should have asked first, he said. I should have called and said, Mom, we're worried. Can we come and talk about what's happening? Not come with boxes and a plan. She held his eye. Yes, she said. That's right. I'm sorry, he said. I know you are, she said. Ellen held the laptop. I'm sorry too, she said. I told David to bring the boxes. I thought it would help to have them ready. Ready for what? Margaret said. Ready for me to agree with you? Ellen looked at the table. Yes, she said. Honestly, I thought if we had the boxes and the materials and the plan, it would feel more real, and you'd be able to see we'd thought about it. You did think about it, Margaret said. You thought about the logistics carefully. You didn't think about what it would feel like to have your children arrive with boxes. Ellen was quiet. What did it feel like? Cassie said. Margaret looked at her granddaughter. Like being handled, she said. Like a problem being managed. Like my 78 years had reduced me to a logistics issue that needed solving. Cassie nodded. That's what I thought, she said, when I came in. Cassie, Ellen said. I'm not trying to take sides, Cassie said. I'm telling you what it looked like from the outside. She held the notebook that was back on the table. And then I read this, and I understood something about what this house is. What is it? David said. Cassie held it. It's the proof that she can make a good decision, Cassie said. The east-facing window, the lot with the tree. Every choice that's in here, they were right. She was right about them. 31 years of morning light proved she was right. She held the notebook. And you came with boxes and a soft hold on a waiting list and, implicitly, the suggestion that she's no longer in a position to make the decisions. That's not what we meant, Ellen said. I know, Cassie said, but that's what arrived. The kitchen was quiet for a moment. David held the table. He looked at his mother. He looked at the boxes. He picked up one of the flat-pack boxes and he put it on the floor. He put the second one on top of the first. He put the third on top of the second. He stood up and carried all three to the back door and put them outside. He came back. He sat down. No boxes, he said. No plan, just talk. Margaret held her cup. Thank you, she said. Can I tell you what I'm scared of? He said. Specifically? Yes, she said. He held the table. I'm scared that you'll have a fall that's worse than February, he said, and that you'll be alone, and that time will pass before anyone knows. He looked at her. I'm scared that I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I could have done something and I was too concerned with your independence to do it. She held the cup. That's a real fear, she said. I understand it. Is there an answer to it? He said. That doesn't require you to. Let me think about what I actually need, she said. Not what you've decided I need. What I actually need, in this house, to make the fear smaller. Okay, he said. The backstep, she said. A proper railing. I've been meaning to have one put in. I'll handle it this weekend, David said. I'll hire someone, Margaret said. I'll have it done. But yes, that would be a start. What else? Ellen said. A conversation, Margaret said. Regular. Not checking in. Actually talking. About how things are, what I need. What's working and what isn't. We can do that, Ellen said. And you call before you come, Margaret said. You don't arrive with boxes. You call when you say, Mom, I'd like to come see you. And I say yes. Or I say, not this weekend. And either answer is valid. Ellen held the laptop. That's fair, she said. And at some point, Margaret said, I'll visit the Westfield place. With you, and I'll tell you what I think. David looked at her. You'll actually look at it? He said. I said I would, she said. I'm not inflexible. I'm not trying to pretend that nothing needs to change. She looked at the notebook. I'm trying to be part of the conversation about what changes. Cassie had been quiet for a while. She was looking at the notebook. Graham, she said. Margaret looked at her. The 1993 entry, Cassie said, about standing on the foundation. You wrote that you hadn't stood on something you could call yours in almost 3 years. She paused. How long has it been since you built this? 31 years, Margaret said. And in 31 years, Cassie said, have you had something that was yours? Margaret held the cup. She thought about this. She thought about the garden, about the east-facing window and the morning light, about the study where she kept her books and her notebooks, and the photograph of Robert on the desk that she chose to keep facing her, not turned away, not filed somewhere, facing her, because she'd decided that's where it should be. Yes, she said. I have. I thought so, Cassie said. What are you thinking? Margaret said. I'm thinking that the thing you were building toward in 1992 is the thing you've had for 31 years, Cassie said. And that what you're defending right now is not just a house. It's the whole of it. The choosing and the building and the morning light and the 31 years of it being yours. She looked at David and Ellen. She's not being stubborn. She's defending something real. I know she is, David said, quietly. Do you? Cassie said. He held the table. He looked at his mother. He said, "The house is yours. It's always been yours. I didn't." He stopped. He started again. "I came with boxes because I'd already decided the shape of things. I didn't ask because I was afraid of the answer." He held her eye. "That was wrong." "Yes," she said. "What do you need from me?" he said. "To feel like this is something we're doing together, and not something being done to you." She held her cup. She looked at her son, 53 years old, the same age she'd been when she built the house, when she'd stood in the mud in November and looked at the tree and decided, "This is where I'll be." He was a good man. He was afraid. "Ask me things," she said, "before I decide them. Ask what I want, what I'm afraid of, what I've noticed about my own situation. I've been living in this body and this house for 31 years. I have information." She paused. "Use it." He held the table. "Okay," he said. "And then," she said, "when you have something you want to say, come and say it." "Not with boxes, with the thing you're actually trying to say." He nodded. They sat. Ellen said, "Can I show you the Westfield place? Just the pictures, not as a plan, just to know what we were looking at." Margaret held the cup. "Yes," she said. "Show me." Ellen opened the laptop. She turned it, and Margaret leaned forward and looked at the photographs. One floor, walk-in shower, a garden that was well maintained in the institutional way of community gardens, a common room that was pleasant and probably empty most of the time. She looked at the photographs. She thought about the east-facing window. She thought about the step that had caught her foot in February. She thought about the oak tree. "The garden is nice," she said. "It has a good herb section," Ellen said. "I have a better one," Margaret said. Ellen almost smiled. "Yes," she said. "You do." Margaret held the cup. "I'll visit," she said, "when I'm ready." Not as a decision, as a visit. "That's enough," Ellen said. Cassie got up and refilled the coffee without being asked. She did it the way Margaret had always appreciated, not asking, just noticing the cup was low and doing the thing. She put the pot back and sat back down. Margaret held the fresh coffee. She looked at the kitchen. The light was different now. Afternoon, not morning, coming from a different angle. In the morning it came from the east, as she'd planned. In the afternoon, it went elsewhere, and the kitchen was lit from the ambient quality of the day, rather than the specific directional thing. She thought, "I know this light. I know every version of the light in this kitchen because I chose the window that produces it." She thought, "That matters." Not as sentimentality. It matters as information. Knowing where you are is not a small thing. "The railing," she said to David, "if you want to help with something practical." "Tell me what you want," he said. "The back step," she said. "A proper railing on the left side, because that's the side I lead with coming down. Good grip." "Not decorative. Functional." "I'll find someone Monday," he said. "I'd like to be there when you talk to them," she said. "So I can describe what I need." "Yes," he said. "And the bathroom," she said. "I've been thinking about grab bars." "The shower and next to the toilet. I haven't done it because it felt like..." She stopped. "Like admitting something." "It's not admitting anything," Cassie said. "I put grab bars in half my patients' homes." "They're just sensible." "I know," Margaret said. "That's the professional assessment. It's harder from the inside." "I know," Cassie said. "Will you help me figure out what I need?" Margaret said. "In the house, what would actually make a difference?" "Yes," Cassie said. "Absolutely. That's the thing I can actually do." "Good," Margaret said. She held the cup. She thought about what she'd said earlier. "I'm ready to accept help. I'm not ready to disappear from my own life." She thought about the difference between those two things and how hard it was to hold both of them at once without one erasing the other. The accepting help part required letting people in. The not disappearing part required staying, which sometimes meant saying no, which sometimes looked like stubbornness to people who decided help meant taking over. The trick was not giving up the second thing to get the first. She'd been doing that trick her whole adult life in various forms. She thought she could keep doing it. "I want to show you something," she said. She got up, carefully, deliberately, the way she moved now, which was not the way she'd moved at 50 and was still entirely adequate, and went to the back door. She opened it. She led them to the garden. The May garden was not at its best. Not the summer peak, not the wild abundance of July, but it was clearly a living thing that was being cared for. The herb section along the south fence. The perennials that came back every year without being asked. The bed she'd been expanding slowly, adding to, changing, a record of 31 years of decisions. She stopped at the oak tree. It was large now. The kind of large that a tree becomes when nobody plants it to be large, when it just grows because that's what oaks do, and someone had the sense not to cut it down. She put her hand on it. I bought this lot because of this tree, she said. Her children were behind her. Cassie was beside her. November 1992, she said. I stood in the mud, and I looked at this tree and I thought, whoever planted this chose well, and I wanted to be the next person who chose this. She held the buck, 31 years ago. She looked at David. When something happens to me, she said, and something will, eventually, something will. I'd like it to happen in a place I chose. She looked at him. That's what I'm asking for. He held her eye. I understand, he said. Do you? I think I do, he said. Not all of it, but more than I did this morning. She held the tree. Good, she said. She turned and went back toward the house. The step, she said. The left side. Functional, not decorative. Monday, David said. I'll be here, she said. She went inside. She went to the kitchen and stood at the window and looked at the garden from inside, which was a different view than from the garden itself. Framed, purposeful, the specific rectangle she'd chosen 31 years ago because she wanted to see the morning light and the garden and the oak tree from the place where she started every day. She heard her children talking in the garden. She couldn't hear the words. She held her cup. She thought, they love me. That's real. She thought, loving me isn't the same as knowing what I need. She thought, that's the work. That's what the rest of this is going to be. Teaching them the difference. She thought, I've done harder things. She held the cup. The afternoon light was in the kitchen now, the ambient version, not the morning version. It was good in its own way. Different. She knew both versions. She knew the kitchen in every light because she'd chosen the window that produced them. That was the thing, not the tree or the garden or the notebook or the boxes outside the back door. The thing was, she knew where she was. She knew where she was because she'd chosen it, carefully, with full attention, at 53 years old in November mud, and she'd been right about what she was choosing. That knowledge was not a small thing. It was not a small thing to be asked to give up. If any part of this stayed with you, if you've been at that kitchen table, on either side of it, leave something below. Tell me what the boxes looked like when they arrived. Tell me what it felt like to be the one who brought them, if that's the side you've been on. Tell me what you'd want someone to understand about the place where you've built your life. Sometimes the most important thing you can say for someone is not what they need to do next. Sometimes it's, this is yours. You get to decide. There are people in your life right now who are getting older, who are in houses they've built or chosen or stayed in for reasons you might not fully know. And there will come a time, if it hasn't already come, when someone in their life will want to help by deciding, by arriving with a plan and boxes and a soft hold on a waiting list. And the help will be real. The love behind it will be real. And it will still be possible to do it wrong. Margaret knew how to be helped. She'd been accepting help for 78 years in various forms. She knew the difference between help and management, between care and capture, between someone asking what you need and someone arriving with the answer already organized. She'd been clear. She'd been heard. Not completely. These things are rarely complete. But the boxes were outside. The conversation had happened. The railing was coming on Monday, and Cassie was going to do a proper assessment, and someone had finally asked what she needed before deciding what she was getting. That was enough for today. She held her cup. She watched the garden through the east-facing window she'd argued for in 1993, and won. The afternoon moved through the house the way it always did. She was still here. She'd chosen this.